You got paid this month. Look at the word for it. Salary. It's hiding a mineral. Salary comes from the Latin sal, salt. And that gives us history's favorite paycheck fact. Roman soldiers were paid in salt. You've heard it everywhere. Trivia nights, textbooks, that one coworker who says it every single time salt comes up. It sounds perfect. It's clean, it's repeatable, and for over 250 years, people have passed it around as truth. There's just one problem. It almost certainly never happened. So here's the puzzle. If soldiers were never paid in salt, why does your salary still carry the word? Because the link is real. Salary really does come from the Latin salarium, and salarium really is connected to sal, salt, through the adjective salarius. No linguist argues with that. But here's the strange part. No Roman ever wrote down what that connection actually meant. Not one surviving source. Every version of the salt payment story is a guess in a nice outfit. And the real answer runs down a 242-kilometer road, past a price-gouging cartel, straight into a soldier's actual wages, which were paid in coin. So where did paid in salt actually come from? Not Rome. Try 1771. That year, an Italian Latin dictionary claimed salarium was an annual salt revenue given to soldiers. It was a mistake. The author had confused Roman salt taxes with military pay, an easy slip to make and apparently an impossible one to take back. Because it sounded great, other scholars repeated it. Some even coined a fancy phrase, salarium argentum, salt money, to make the link feel official. It wasn't. They basically invented Latin to support a fact they'd already gotten wrong, which means your favorite Roman fact is younger than the United States. Defenders of the story usually reach for one older name, Pliny the Elder. Writing in the 1st century CE, Pliny mentions that in older times a soldier was paid with salt. Case closed? Not quite. Pliny was describing Rome's dim, distant past, centuries before he was born. And Roman memory of its own early history was, let's say, generous. One vague line, about an era nobody could check, from a writer who never met a good story he didn't like. That's the entire evidence base. As one classicist put it, there isn't the tiniest scrap of proof. Ever. So if it wasn't salt, what landed in a legionary's hands? Coin. The Romans called it the stipendium. Regular pay started around 405 BC, during the long siege of a town called Veii. Before that, fighting for Rome was an unpaid civic duty. You armed yourself, showed up, and hoped for loot. By the time of Julius Caesar, a soldier earned about 225 denarii a year. Caesar had just doubled it, from roughly 112. Under Augustus, that 225 arrived 3 times a year, 75 denarii a shot. Steady, predictable. On paper, decent money. But you didn't keep most of it. The army deducted your food, your boots, your tent, your weapons. By some estimates, a soldier pocketed barely a third of his wage. The rest went to his own upkeep. In other words, you paid the Roman army for the privilege of being stabbed at on its behalf. Some fresh recruits even owed money before their first payday. So no, nobody was wheeling barrels of salt to the front as payroll. They were counting silver and watching most of it evaporate. So where does salt fit at all? Here's where the real story gets good. Because salt did matter, enormously. Before refrigeration, salt wasn't seasoning. It was the main technology keeping food from rotting. Salt your meat and fish, and they feed you all winter. Skip it, and you starve. That made salt something close to money in its own right. So Rome built a road for it. The Via Salaria, the Salt Road, ran about 242 kilometers from Rome to the Adriatic coast. It was so old the Sabines were walking it to fetch salt before Rome technically existed. It left the city through a gate literally named the Porta Salaria, the Salt Gate. The Romans were not being subtle, and the salt itself came from pans near Ostia at the mouth of the Tiber. Control that supply, and you control a city's stomach. At one point, the Ostia salt traders jacked their prices so high the Roman state had to step in and take over the whole trade. The ancient world's least surprising business story. Salt didn't just flavor the empire, it fed it, funded it, and moved armies down a road named after it. So what did salarium actually mean? The likeliest answer is quieter than the myth, and stranger for it. Salarium was probably just an allowance, money for provisions. Possibly, long ago, money set aside for salt specifically, back when salt was precious enough to name a paycheck after. Then the salt part faded, and salarium came to mean simply the money you're owed. No salt ever changed hands. The word just outlived its own reason, which, honestly, is most words. And it left fingerprints. When you call someone worth their salt, you're echoing the same logic. Salt equaled value, equaled what a person earned. The Greeks took it darker, sometimes trading salt for slaves. So the salt is real, the value is real, the word is real. It's only the picture, a centurion clutching a fistful of white crystals instead of coins, that never happened. That's the quiet trick sitting in your paycheck. Salt was once worth a road, a war, a gate in a city wall, and a word that would outlast the empire that coined it. Today, it's the cheapest thing on your table, 40 varieties, handed out for free at every drive-thru, scraped off fries and banned by half the diets on your phone. We made salt so ordinary, we forgot it was ever extraordinary. But the word held on. Every payday, you say a sentence about a mineral your ancestors would have guarded like gold. We kept the word, we just threw away the reason, and most of us never noticed it was gone.